James promised me when I plug this in.
Looks good. You're good.
Oh, okay, good. Thanks, Travis. And what a pleasure to share a stage with such talent. My name is Allison Hile, and I am an abortion nerd. Abortions have always and will always continue to exist. People have searched for herbs that would end a pregnancy for thousands of years. The first recorded recipe for an abortion-producing drug was from 2400 BC. Ben Franklin even published herbal remedies. And many gods have been beseeched to end pregnancies. Think for a moment about the people you know who've had an abortion. If there's anyone out there who doesn't know someone who's had an abortion, take a moment and ponder if it's possible that you may have said something out loud that made them uncomfortable talking to you about it. We all sometimes plant seeds that we don't mean to. I know I have said I don't think I could ever place a baby for adoption and mistakenly sent the message that I think that's wrong. My activism may have kept some people from talking to me about a miscarriage, even though I can totally relate to the grief of pregnancy loss. Many politicians have said things like, abortion should be legal but rare, or I'm not pro-abortion. This also sends a message. We're actually pro-abortion care. Remember, the same person might risk their lives to have a baby at one point in life, and at another point be willing to risk their lives to have an abortion. We won't, but if we shared all the reasons and situations and beliefs that just the people we know of who've had abortions, they would all be different. You have no idea how many times those of us who have worked in abortion care have heard, my situation is different. I know I'll burn in hell for this. I know it's wrong, but I have to do it. May I sit here because I don't want to go back out in the waiting room with those sluts. You don't understand. The man involved in this is a pro-life legislator. Of course I will be back out picketing. Abortion is murder. But my situation is very, very different. Just so you know, we would not co-sign a consent form for anybody who thought they were going to burn in hell. And here we are. The tortoise has won the race. R.I.P. Roe versus Wade. Monday morning, January 22nd, 1973, to Thursday, June 24th, 2022. It was never enough. It never included access. Now, Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization has thrown legality back to the states. Missouri was the very first state, moments after Dobbs, to declare all abortions illegal within our borders. We expect about 25 states to outlaw abortion. State laws are changing daily, and some for the good. This past week, in the first vote of its kind, Kansas, yes, Kansas! Even rural Kansas voted 60-40 to keep abortion legal in their state. And Idaho's Supreme Court put a hold on an anti-abortion law. Indiana, however, made it illegal. No one can keep up with all the issues of today. There are too many. There's way too much information to process and retain, and much of it is too grim to be compatible with any sort of a happy life. If we each pick one and work on it, not solve the whole thing, just pick one issue, the world will be a better place. Remember, talking about your issue to others counts as working. Bringing it up keeps it in the forefront of people's minds, and it gives permission for other folks to support it. The first time Matthew and I came to the Society was 40 years ago to hear a presentation on abortion. During the past 40 years, I have been absolutely humbled by the number of issues so many ethical society members have been actively involved in. While some of you here at the Society did things like dig wells in other countries to assure fresh water, improve humanist schools in Uganda, work for single-payer health care, keep unhoused folks warm in the winter, help immigrants adjust to St. Louis. While you did these things, I worked on my little corner of the world. Rather than be overwhelmed or just bury my head, I picked sexuality to work on. I'm not a physician, an attorney, or a politician, or even the most expert on this, but I am dedicated and I'm willing to speak publicly. I worked at the Hope Clinic for Women in Granite City, Illinois for almost 30 years. During those decades, I did counseling and sexuality education, as well as media and public speaking for the clinic, and never, ever did I hesitate to say who I was, where I worked, and what we did. Supporting access to safe legal abortion care is nothing to be ashamed of. My list of violence against abortion providers is quite incomplete. It stops in 2009. If you're interested in a complete list, you can go to the National Abortion Federation's website at prochoice.org. I also want you to please remember that when folks on our side participate in something violent, it damages our cause. Even if you think it's something funny, even if you think you're really angry, please don't do that. I started at Hope Clinic for Women in 1979, and I was there in 1982 when, the day after the Roe anniversary, the clinic was firebombed. All of it was smoke damaged, and a third of it had to be rebuilt. I was there when Dr. Zavallis and his wife were kidnapped and held for 8 days, bound, blindfolded, and gagged on the dirt floor of an abandoned ammunition bunker between Springfield and Decatur. The kidnappers were 3 men who called themselves the Army of God, and all 3 served prison time. I daily walked through protesters who screamed at me by name. I filmed them, I listened to their weekly radio shows, I read articles by and about anti-abortion activists, I talked to many of them, I even had coffee with a few of them. I wanted them to think of me as a person and not a target. Those of us involved in abortion care used to play games to be sure we could name all 9 Supreme Court justices and what their position on Roe v. Wade was. We always knew the Supreme Court was the weak link. I understand you can't read this slide, just bear with me. You're not supposed to. While abortions were whispered about and kept private, anti-abortion activists became louder. I had friends who privately would tell me how much they valued my work, but they didn't want to upset their pro-life family and friends by talking to them about it. Our side goofed. While I agree with medical confidentiality, what we didn't do was support patients and those accompanying to the clinic to speak openly and comfortably about abortion. We also pretty much excluded men, and I think that was a terrible mistake. It cut out almost half of our supporters. As the years passed, the U.S. culture started to change. But people didn't worry because Roe was settled law, right? Even Senator Susan Collins of Maine thought so. The number of anti-abortion organizations burgeoned. The list behind me is of 100 or so from Wikipedia, and you can't read it, it's too small, but I wanted to put them all up there. What I really want you to know, and pay attention to this, none, not one of those organizations supports birth control. Ronald Reagan morphed from the governor of California, who signed legal abortion into law before Roe versus Wade, to the anti-abortion presidential candidate who joined forces with Reverend Jerry Falwell to attract his followers. States passed laws they knew were clearly unconstitutional, limiting abortion. These were purposeful, to be in the legal pipeline for the makeup of the Supreme Court to change. Legislatures gave huge amounts of money to anti-abortion crisis pregnancy centers like Thrive on Lindell here in St. Louis. Trump appointed 26 federal judges they were awful, but we were all busy and captivated by his tweets and didn't quite notice that. By the time Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg died, we knew it was over. But there is some good news. Because pro-choice folks saw what was happening, plans were laid. You do not need to start an underground railroad, nor become an herbalist. Both of these things could land you in jail. What you do need to be aware of is the networks that have already been formed. The National Abortion Rights Action League, or NARAL, pulled its support out of Missouri a few years ago when things started to look grim here. What used to be NARAL Pro-Choice Missouri is now simply Pro-Choice Missouri. And their expert team is still here working hard politically to change things in Missouri. They could use your support. It's prochoicemissouri.org. Likely, most everyone in this room, and maybe some of you online, know about the St. Louis Planned Parenthood's new clinic across the river in Fairview Heights, Illinois. That they managed to keep it a secret until they opened in a Haven state was huge. That's another one. Haven states like Illinois are putting legal abortion into law. States like Texas and Missouri are referred to as hostile states, and they're doing everything they can to make it illegal. What you may not know about is the number of non-Planned Parenthood or independent abortion providers. They're all across the country and they all have different names, so these indie clinics don't have the name recognition that Planned Parenthood does. But there are more of them than there are Planned Parenthoods that provide abortion. Reproductive rights are important, but they're not enough. We need reproductive justice. Even if you have the legal right to something, you may not be able to afford it, travel to it, or take time off work to get there. Rights do not guarantee access. Even with Roe, lots of people have been unable to access reproductive care. We need reproductive justice. It is folks who are Black or brown or trapped in poverty who are most affected by these laws. Bodily autonomy is something very fundamental to each and every one of us. The National Network of Abortion Funds is a network of over 90 self-governing grassroots organizations. The Missouri Abortion Fund is one of them, and I am a founding board member. We incorporated in 2015 and have given over $500,000 to directly help thousands of Missourians pay for abortion care. And I thank a number of you in this audience who have given your support. Based upon our budget, we let the clinics we work with know how much we can give them to help patients pay for care. We hold back enough to pay for one staff person, office, legal, and security expenses, but the rest goes directly to help pay for abortion care. We have agreements with clinics that direct our funds to Missourians with no other strings attached. It is the clinic staff who works with the patient that makes the decision about how much they get, whether or not they get the funds and how much they get. The Missouri Abortion Fund only helps Missourians with the actual medical costs. The Midwest Access Coalition, however, helps Midwesterners from 12 states with travel, food, lodging, and more. Recently, they've even started working with Elevated Access, a group of pilots who volunteer to fly patients to places where they can receive reproductive or transgender care. As patients from other states pour into Illinois, the new Regional Logistics Center in Fairview Heights helps coordinate all of this. They work with both the Hope Clinic in Granite City and Planned Parenthood in Fairview Heights to assure that patients get the services they need. They coordinate funding, travel arrangement, and they've even started a food bank and child care, because remember, 60% of the patients are already parents. 2 other abortion providers have plans to open in Carbondale, Illinois. This is going to take some of the pressure off the 2 clinics across the river and shorten the wait time for an appointment. If you're helping someone try to find an abortion anywhere in the country, send them online to ineedana.org. There's several sites, but I don't expect you to remember all of them, so I'm just going to focus on this one. ineedana.org is in English and Spanish. ineedana.org can also explain the different types of abortion care and the costs. An early abortion is about $500. Those later in pregnancy can cost over $5,000. Any recent parents out here who can tell me how much normal labor and delivery costs? It's about $20,000. Before I list the types of abortions, I want to be clear that our Plan A is to make contraception easily available to everyone. Ever had your plans disrupted? Well, that's where Plan B comes into play. Plan B is emergency contraception, and it can be taken up to 5 days after sex to prevent a pregnancy. The sooner the better. It's about $50, and it's over the counter. Now, let's talk about Plan C, or the abortion pills. They can end a pregnancy up to 11 weeks, but are most effective under 8 weeks. In the past couple years, more than half of all abortion care in this country has been managed at home using medication. These two pills, which are used in combination, are mifepristone and Cytotec. Mifepristone began as RU-486 in France, and I can't remember the name of it without thinking of the song Meet the Flintstones. Mifepristone. Okay, you got the idea. Mifepristone is taken first, and it unhooks the developing embryo or fetus from the uterine wall. Used several hours later, Cytotec causes uterine contractions to expel the pregnancy, and that can take about 24 hours. The experience is no different than a spontaneous miscarriage. Now, with telemedicine, there is no medical reason to go to an actual clinic. Any very rare complications are treated exactly like a spontaneous miscarriage. The FDA has approved mailing these pills, but in the past week or so, some states are starting to pass laws against that. State laws are changing almost weekly. Just remember Kansas. There are two other medications that can be used to create an abortion off-label. They're less effective than the two I just talked about, but I want you to know about them. Methotrexate is commonly used for autoimmune conditions like lupus or rheumatoid arthritis or Crohn's disease. The second is Cytotec, which is used to prevent ulcers in people taking nonsteroidal anti-inflammatories. Yes, Cytotec is also one of the pills I mentioned before that's used with mifepristone. It's getting more complicated now for physicians to prescribe either of these two drugs off-label, as pharmacies like CVS are now requiring a diagnosis code to prove that they're not being used for abortion. To be fair, they're concerned about a lack of these pills because the people who are using them for other things are having trouble getting a hold of them now. There's some other new things going on in the reproductive justice arena that you may or may not be aware of. South American countries are starting to liberalize abortion laws. My husband and son brought back this protest flag from Argentina for me, which clearly worked, and they knew it. I would think it was the best present ever. European countries have had hormonal contraception available without a prescription for years. Finally, the U.S. is considering this. We no longer need to require a Pap or cancer test before giving a prescription, as we now know that cervical cancer is caused by HPV, for which we can test and vaccinate against. Some of you may have heard the NPR article about Dr. Meg Autry, a University of San Francisco obstetrician. She's been working for the past few years with a group called Prowess to start a floating clinic in the federal waters of the Gulf of Mexico to serve our southern states. At best, the floating Prowess clinic is about a year away. A Tucson City Council member thought briefly about donating land to a Native American tribe so a Planned Parenthood could set up a clinic on it, like a casino. This, however, was a very white idea. and was not embraced by the tribe. I caution all of us white folks to consider how these laws and our ideas affect people of color and those living in poverty. My mother's pre-Roe line to me was, "Young lady, if you get pregnant, you'll be on the next plane to New York." That's just not possible for many, many people. If you think the Founding Fathers were not very concerned about Blacks, Native Americans, women, and particularly abortion care when they wrote the Constitution, you're probably right. It needs to be law instead of a Supreme Court decision. The Women's Health Protection Act is a federal bill codifying legal abortion in every state. It has passed the U.S. House of Representatives and recently just failed passing the Senate by a very narrow margin. Just maybe the midterm elections can help that. There are websites like Women on Web, that's what the WOW stands for in Canada there. It's a nonprofit in Canada that provides direct access to abortion pills. They mail them in 16 different languages, and this was started by a Dutch physician, Dr. Rebecca Gompertz. She began providing abortion with women on waves on a ship off the coasts of countries where abortion was illegal. As Dutch officials became skittish about licensing her, she began to do things in 2015 like drop abortion pills via drone from Germany into Poland. Now, with the support of the Canadian government, Women on Web provides abortion pills to pregnant folks, and they can also be ordered ahead of time just to have on hand. But alas, a few days ago, Women on Web stopped mailing pills to the U.S., at least temporarily. Their site still has good information on using Cytotec alone. However, another site founded by Dr. Rebecca Gompertz is aidaccess.org in Europe. aidaccess.org continues to help folks in the U.S. They have European physicians do an online consult and provide a prescription for abortion pills, which are then filled by a very reputable pharmacy in India. Catch is delivery takes about 1 to 3 weeks. The cost is $110, but what you need to remember is that what we used to think of as constitutional and legal has been turned upside down. Unless you have an address in a haven state and you're on a very reputable site, and there are some in Illinois for Illinois addresses, I don't recommend ordering abortion pills online. There are already sites out there that are charging a lot for pills that often do not work. Over a decade ago, we had patients come to Hope Clinic who had used these but were still pregnant. I have some other cautions for you. 1, don't do anything illegal. Don't do anything illegal. 2, don't use online period trackers. These, in combination with the GPS on a cell phone, can tell anti-abortion activists that someone is pregnant and that they're going to an abortion clinic. I guess you'll just have to go out and buy one of those newfangled paper calendars to keep track of periods. When you go online for information, use incognito or private search engines like DuckDuckGo or StartPage. These are more private than regular search engines like Google and Bing, but they're not perfect. Clear your browser history and all your cookies if it's possible that anybody else is going to use your computer. And you still will not be totally anonymous online. Make no mistake, anti-abortion organizations have cash pouring into them right now that they have the advantage. Their goal is to prevent access to abortion and birth control everywhere. I mean, we can only hope the James Webb Space Telescope finds a friendly galaxy. While currently it is legal in Missouri to help someone getting an abortion in another state, I am certain there are already Missouri legislators out there writing bills to prevent it. In our most recent Missouri legislative session, one anti-abortion bill passed. It was a grim one, but 50 others were introduced. A number of those had to do with aiding and abetting an abortion in other states. Haven states are working to block this kind of thing. Many of us were taught not to talk about things like religion or politics, or cancer, or death, or miscarriages, or sex, or anything else that might make somebody uncomfortable or be controversial. Where we are right now is exactly where that has gotten us. There is no need to be hateful or argumentative, but there is a need for us all to talk about legal abortion. It can be more of a Zen approach, where you let the hateful comments go by and you proceed with kindness. We should speak so that others are able to hear us. We can speak so that others can hear us. It is time to stop worrying about whether we will be thought poorly of and take back the high moral ground. Outshine the opposition. Very few people believe in government-mandated childbirth, and yet that is the power that has been given to the states. My own experience in bringing up abortion care with strangers is very positive. For years, the anti-abortion folks commanded the high moral ground and spoke as if the world would agree with them. Well, I begin by assuming strangers will agree with me, and almost all of them do. Assuming they agree and speaking matter-of-factly gives them permission to agree and support it. I do this in grocery stores, Verizon stores, car repair shops, at scuba diving lessons, wherever I go. Last week, I had lunch with a young couple from Sao Paulo, Brazil. She was very appreciative of my work, but he was surprised at how openly and matter-of-factly I spoke about abortion. I explained that abortion is actually very common and that 1 in 4 Americans with uteruses have had one. I don't think we have to argue about abortion. The only thing I think we must agree on is that it should be legal. Otherwise, we can politely agree to disagree. If someone does disagree, I act, and frankly, I am surprised that they would believe in government-mandated childbirth. Phrased that way, even if they don't like the idea of ending a pregnancy, they go along with it. I truly do not care what people believe for themselves. They have that right. But I do care when they vote to force their belief into laws. I understand that politics goes in cycles and that at 68 I may not live to see the end of this one. How do I manage with all this? I think about the long-gone people that planted the oak trees in our yard. They provide our house with shade in this heat. I am now planting oak trees, and not just the ones that grow in yards and parks, but I plant seeds of change that will help protect the beating hearts of pregnant lives in the future. I know you're overwhelmed. I know you're stressed and anxious from all these issues and the continuing pandemic. But if you want any sense of control, pick one issue to work on. I promise you don't have to solve the entire issue, but you do have to work on it. At least talk about it. That counts as working. You just need to pick at least one. You need to pick one. So I ask, what are you going to do?
Pick one.
Louder now and all together.
Pick one.
Oh, once more with feeling.
Pick one.
See, don't you feel better already?